Hi, this is Jonah Dempsey, your host of the Human Design Deconditioning Guide. Today's topic is variable. We'll be doing an intro to variable. So if you go on mybodygraph.com or Jovian Archive, most of these sites that generate a body graph for you, they will show you 4 arrows. 2 arrows on the design side on the left of your body graph, and 2 arrows on the personality side on the right. These arrows are referring to variable, and variable is basically a synthetic shorthand of the tone information for 4 different calculations. So starting the top left arrow of the body graph next to the design, sun, and earth, this is the tone calculation for the design, sun, and earth. At the bottom left, by the nodes, and then the bottom right on the personality nodes, and then the top right for the personality, sun, earth. So you take these 4 calculations, the personality and design, sun, earths, and the personality and the design nodes. And each one of these can have either left or right variable. Now, the way variable is computed is you take the tonal information for that calculation, and if it's tones 1 through 3, that's left variable. If it's tones 4 through 6, that is right variable. So, if you have, say, your design nodes, if you've been studying the color information for the design nodes, you'll know that that is environment. It's the external determination. The color is going to be, if it's color 1, it's caves, 2 is markets, 3 is kitchens, 4 is mountains, 5 is valleys, and color 6 is shores. Okay, but within each one of these, there's going to be 2 variations, the left variable and the right variable. So if your if your mountain's 4th color, and then your tone 1, 2, or 3, that's going to be active mountains. If your tone 4, 5, or 6, that is going to be passive mountains. So the variant is determined by whether you're left or right variable. And this goes for all 4 of those calculations. Your design, sun, earth, which is your determination, also known as your dietary regimen. The design nodes, which is your environment. The personality nodes, your view or perspective. And your personality, sun, and earth, your motivation. For each of these, there will be variation. For instance, if your 4th color motivation, that is to say 4th color personality, sun, and earth, then if you're tone 1, 2, or 3, you're left variable, and it's the master, basically. And if you're tone 4, 5, or 6, it's the novice. So it's all about moving into one or the other side of this binary. And you can look more into that when you look into PHS, which talks about your dietary regimen and the environment, and when you look into rave psychology, which talks about perspective and motivation. But now I just want to talk about what variable means at a very basic level. Again, this is just intro to variable. So now that you know how to calculate variable and what it's actually referring to, we can talk about what does it mean. Okay, well, leftness, the left variable, comes from the 7-centered being, and it has ties to our 7-centered past. We are 9-centered, and we are evolving towards the right variable. So when you see somebody who's quad left, meaning all 4 of their variables are left, that person is the most 7-centered, strategic, strategy-oriented person, right? That's what it's about, basically. That person is very connected to that seven-centered world and all the seven-centered accoutrements, having to strategize, having to, plan, and having to execute your strategy, and having to survive based on being able to concentrate and focus and wield the mind, and so on. Now, on the opposite side of it, and of course there are 14 variations in between out of the 16 possible variations of 4 variables, you have the quad right. The quad right is the most futuristic in some sense, and there's no value judgment here. It's not the one's better or worse. It's that the quad right is basically fully in the future where we've left behind strategy, which is kind of the great irony of using strategy and authority to get there. It really appeals to our old-fashioned approach. But the quad right is basically aiming to be in a flow state whereby they don't wield the mind. They're not able to use their mind, so to speak. They're not able to focus their energy. They're not able to come up with strategies. They're not going to be able to learn the way that we typically learn, which is a very left-focused way of learning. And they don't really have a filter in the way that left is all about pattern matching and filtering. And left is so active and right is so passive. And so instead, the quad right, in their ideal anyway, is going to be in this flow state where they're letting others pull information from them, and they're providing that resource for others. But it's not through willful effort, if you get me. It's not that they're exerting effort to do that. They're not trying. As soon as they try, as soon as they go, oh, I'm trying to remember that thing that was relevant to this, that I was supposed to say or do, it all falls apart. So this is just to give you kind of some inklings of the difference in left and right. Now, of course, leftness and rightness can apply to any of these 4 calculations. And it's going to have different meanings depending on where it is. But if you kind of think about active and passive as a fundamental starting point. So what does it mean when your first variable, well, it really depends which way you're doing it. Some people will say like PLL, DLR, that's actually starting on the top right. That's starting on the personality variable. But if you're following the 4 transformations, which move from determination, from dietary regimen, to environment, to perspective, to motivation, you're actually starting on the top left, then the bottom left, then the bottom right, and the top right. So it's really up to you which way you want to do. So, sorry, I decided which way to go. So in any case, I guess the point here is that, so let's just start, let's follow the 4 transformations. And the point here is that we're going to look at each one and kind of deconstruct what left or right variable means for that particular transformation. So starting at the top left, we have dietary regimen. So dietary regimen, left variable or right variable. Now at a fundamental level, this is going to be basically what your brain needs. Like, what does your brain need to function properly for its cognition? So left variable, the brain is going to need Sudoku or chess or challenging active mental gymnastics. It's going to need that to kind of come alive and to wake up and to exercise, right? It needs some kind of, it needs to play Go. It needs strategy. You know, a lot of times, video games can be very good in this regard. And the brain needs that. It needs that activity. And if it doesn't have that activity, it's going to lose its cognitive potential. The right variable for determination is going to need a certain amount of flow state, of repose. The brain's going to need to rest. You find it's very hard for people who have the variables pointing in at each other. Like when you look at the body graph, the top left variable is pointing right, the top right variable is pointing left. So they're making arrows that point in at each other. For these people, their mind is so active and busy, it's expecting the brain to be able to handle, right? It's expecting the brain to be able to handle it. It wants the brain to be able to, keep up with how active and busy and zippy it is. And the brain's like, I just want to flow. The brain wants to be in a flow state. It wants to be in a hypnotic trance state. It wants to be in a meditative state. And it needs that state. Right? So this is all about what the brain needs. Again, this is completely on the design side we're talking about. This is the design, sun, and earth, which means it's unconscious, which means you're not going to be aware of it. I'll sometimes tell people something about their unconscious side, and they'll go, oh yeah, that's totally me. And I'll say, really? And they'll say, yeah, I've been aware of that. I'm so aware of my unconscious. And I'll say, well, do you have undefined ego? And they'll be like, yeah. Well, maybe you're just trying to prove, how well you know yourself in some sort of competitive game. So, the design side, we don't have access to it. We do not have access to it. If you have a left variable personality sun earth and a right variable design sun earth, your mind wants to stay active, but your brain wants to be passive. Mind and brain, different things that they need. Okay, so for the determination, left variable needs a lot of strategic exercise. Right variable needs a certain amount of repose, hypnosis, meditation, relaxation, flow state. All right, now let's look at environment. Left versus right environment. Now, I am right environment. Means I need a certain amount of stimulation in terms of what I want to watch, because I'm so passive and chill out that my correct environment is something like an opium den. It's like an opium den, but opium dens are boring if they're just in a blank room. The opium den needs, the pretty curtains with all the patterns on them, and the multicolored carpets, multicolored carpets and chandeliers with that, reflect light in interesting ways. Basically, me as a right environment person, I need a really chill environment. The couch potato environment. Just, the kind of environment that's slow death for left variable. Okay? I need this kind of chilled out environment where I can then watch, or where people are watching, where there's watching going on. Now, someone told me, how did you survive in New York? Because New York is so much hustle and bustle. Such a pinnacle of leftness. New York City, left capital of the world, right? Or probably on par with all the other big cities, Tokyo and so on. Well, I was there for 6 weeks, and I survived just fine because I found my mountain environments. I'm mountain, so I found my rooftops, I found my top floors of buildings and so on. And then, even when I wasn't able to get to a rooftop, I would find places to sit and watch people. And I would find the right variable corner of a primarily left variable place, if I could put it that way. So the right variable is the chill out room. It's the benches, it's the seated or the kind of, reclining. And you're not really busy in the right variable environment. Left variable now is busy. Left variable environment, you're standing. You're in the kitchen talking to people. Left variable, you're not noticing a bunch of things because you're too busy doing. So you're doing. You're not necessarily noticing the other people or everything that's going on around you. You're not taking in the big picture of of the whole environment. You're just busy doing. So if you're at a party, the right variable is like the chill out zone. The left variable is like right in the thick of that hustle and bustle. And the right variable likes a certain amount of stimulation because it wants to be entertained. It's like watching TV. You don't want to watch a boring movie. But really, it's just about taking it all in. And the left variable, too, doesn't necessarily want there to be a ton of chaos and distractions. It's not like they need so much, because they are the stimulation. They are stimulating in that environment. You know, they're busy doing. So when I hang out with left variables, I often give them things to do. They have a left variable environment. So, you know, be busy in that environment. Be doing in that environment. Be picking up and cleaning up, and or playing cards, or serving drinks, or, you know, explaining something, or all of these kind of doing-oriented things. Alright, so when we take variable to the level of personality, the first one that I usually look at is perspective. This is following the 4 transformations. And we get to perspective. The difference between left and right variable perspective. This is the personality nodes. Again, left variable, tones 1, 2, or 3. Right variable, tones 4, 5, or 6. So, I have left variable perspective. What that means is that I'm constantly buzz, bristling with what I notice. It is my mind. It's the awareness part of my mind that's noticing things. It's different from the motivation. This is what I notice in my environment. And so with left variable, I notice a lot. And I'm focusing on one thing to the next. Noticing one thing, moving on to the next thing. And I'm pattern matching what I notice. I haven't really gotten into this part of it, but left variable, pattern matches. Right variable has no filter. So right variable, the binary is it's either fully absorbed, fully wrapped, fully paying attention, or it's not absorbed at all, not paying attention at all. So the right variable, that's what's happening. The left variable is always paying a little attention, but it's kind of checked out until something pattern matches. So these are very, very different. The right variable, either you have their full attention or none at all. And if you have their full attention, they have no pattern matching, no discernment whatsoever in terms of what they're taking in. They just take in everything. Left variable, they're always kind of paying attention and kind of not. And they're basically like waiting for something to pattern match. So for instance, in class, left variables can often skip class and just do the research on their own, do the homework. Right variables should never do homework. Right? For the right variable, let's just say quad right for the sake of, let's do quad right versus quad left to make it more simple. The quad right, homework does not work for them. Because the quad right, the only way they're going to get a proper education is by being fully absorbed in the moment. So class attendance is the most important thing for the quad right. They need to attend, and they need to be fully present. And if they are paying attention, they will be paying their full attention. Right? So the quad right is going to be fully absorbed. And they're not going to be asking or filtering or, should I take this information in or not? Is this relevant to me or not? No. It's all relevant. 100% of it. There's no relevancy filter. There's no salience for the quad right. Salience, something stands out from the rest. No, that's a left thing. So the quad right in class, taking it all in. The quad left is like, I don't even need to be there. The quad left doesn't need to be in class because they're not, the thing is, so I have mostly left. I'm 3 out of 4 left. So say I'm in class, I'm like checked out. Like every now and then, like someone's saying something, I'm like, oh, I recognize that, I know that. That's something I don't know. Okay, here's something I don't know. Is it relevant to me? No, it's not relevant to me. It's like pass. And then someone starts to say something really interesting about something I know about. Maybe they refer to Carl Jung or something, and they say, well, but you know what Jung said about it? And all of a sudden, my ears perk up. Like they weren't talking about Jung at all before. I was checked out. then suddenly someone mentions something that I know, and I lean in, and I pay really close attention, and I start to focus and concentrate and pay all this attention. And then when they're done talking about it, I check out again. It's like I still monitor what's going on. The left is always monitoring, but it's monitoring to pattern match to see if something is relevant to it, at which point it starts to pay attention, becomes engaged. Anyway, so how that works for me with my left perspective is that I am busy noticing stuff. I have like a bristling, kind of a crackling mental activity. What you find with people that have my particular variable, PLL, DLR, which is that I'm all left except for my environment, which is right. What you find is that when we actually keep our mouths shut, we're actually just sitting there in the environment, in our chilled out right environment, just watching, observing. But people pick up on all of our leftness, how our minds are just racing, and our minds are zipping. My eyes are darting, and I'm noticing one thing and the next and the next and the next. And, but again, my environment, my way of being in the environment is very chilled out. It's very, still and not moving and slow movement and kind of docile and kind of this like domestic, for astrology people, I'd almost say it's like a Taurus energy. It's like this kind of laziness, yawning, stretching out on the couch. And yet, my mind is so sharp. So people pick up on us, we actually oftentimes seem more intelligent before we talk. Like we just put off this aura of intelligence, we kind of emanate that, just sitting there, just like completely in our calm state. But people can tell that our minds are so active, that our minds are very present, very observant. We are super attentive listeners. We are super attentive to what's changing in the environment, what's going on in the environment. We're highly situationally aware. And that's because of the left variable. It's like we have the stillness of the right variable environment with the quickness of the left variable perspective. So again, you can see how to synthesize these together. I have a right variable environment. It means I'm going to be very still in that environment. But I have a left variable perspective, which means I'm going to be very focused and quick in what I notice. So I'm quick to notice things, and I'm moving very slowly in the environment. So it comes across as this slow, methodical way of being, which is nevertheless buzzing with quick noticing at a different level. So what is the right perspective like? Well, again, rightness, the right variable is about not really getting to choose what you take in. It's flow state. It's non-discerning. It's, it's not going to be, it's going to appear to be more tranced out. More of a hypnotic, kind of tranced out, chilled out flow state where you're not really sure what they're noticing or not. If you have a bunch of quad rights, you're talking to them, they don't really give you any tells that they're paying attention or not. It's like talking to the ocean. You're just like talking to these quad rights. You're like, wow, they're not really acknowledging. Whereas with left variable, it acknowledges, something registers. Because again, leftness is about pattern matching. It's about that flash of recognition where the left variable person is able to connect what is they're being told to something they already know. And they have that flash of recognition, and they go, okay, I see. And they nod. When you're talking to the quad right, it's blank. You have no idea what registers or not. Okay, so yeah, you can see how different it is to have a right variable environment and a left variable perspective compared to a left variable environment and a right variable perspective. That is going to be somebody who's busy in their environment and moving really quickly, but they're not noticing anything. They're not really, they're either not noticing anything or they're noticing everything, but they're not scanning the environment. Left variable is like scanning, right? Scanning for patterns, scanning for particular information, focused. Again, left variable uses its mind, it wields its mind. Here's the funny thing, the right variable can hold millions of times, unlimited more information than, for all intents and purposes, than the left variable. So it's like this vast storehouse of information they have no way of getting. And sometimes it just seemingly randomly comes out. Someone draws that information out from them, but they have no access to it themselves. Again, I'll just talk about quad right here to make it simple. The quad right person has a tremendous, almost like a photographic memory of all this information with no way to access it. And sometimes when they're in the flow, the information just spontaneously comes out. But when they try, when they're like, oh, you know what would be really good? If I could tell this person what that person told me 8 years ago on this day, on that such day, because they told me all this information that'd be really useful for this person. They can't get it. They can't remember what the person said. But then, spontaneously in the flow, they remember all of it. So the right variable, the quad right here, will say, has this amazing memory, this amazing treasure trove of information they can't get. Left variable only remembers little fragments and little like synopses and buzzwords and little, it has like the one-line descriptions of things. It remembers the minimal amount necessary to be able to convey one unit of information about that thing, right? But the left variable can access it. They can direct their mind. They can direct their mind and say, okay, I'm trying to tell this person, like for me, I have so much left. So I'm trying to tell the viewer about variable. So being left variable, I don't have to go into a flow state. I almost go into a checklist state where I go over my internal checklist of sound bites about variable. And I continue to scan that checklist and go and pattern match against what I've said and say, okay, has what I said conveyed enough the difference in active and passive? Has it conveyed enough the difference in so-and-so, right? So it's really interesting. You can see how the right variable person has so much information they can't access. The left variable person has very little information, but they can access it. Okay, but yeah, again, it's nice to think about how we synthesize these things. Let's just do the 4 combinations of environment and perspective really quick. So left environment, left perspective. The left environment, left perspective is very busy in their environment. They're moving very quickly. They're not taking a lot of time to take in information. They're just moving. Go, right? And then the right environment, on the personality side, the left, I'm being distracted because of all the rock music. I started wondering if I'll get a copyright complaint. I've had that happen on YouTube videos where I'm walking by and someone's playing a song, and then the YouTube video gets banned because the song was in the background. So hopefully the crow cawing sufficiently interrupted or interfered with the song. Okay, so again, we're going to do the 4 combinations of environment perspective. Left. Okay, they're busy in their environment, and they're noticing everything, and they're busy taking in all the information. So they're highly situationally aware, but they're also very active in their environment, and they're probably taking in less than the right environment, because the right environment is so slow and so still that it's able to kind of absorb everything in a certain way. The left variable is going to miss things, but what it's focused on is taking in really quickly, and it's highly situationally aware. Okay, then we have the right environment and the left perspective. That's the one I talked about. The arrows are pointing inward. That's the one I have. That's where you're very still in your environment and you're noticing everything. Okay, then we have left environment, right perspective. It's the one I touched on where I was saying this is someone who's very busy but like sloppy. Like they're busy in their environment, but they're missing a lot of stuff because they seem kind of just tranced out and not really noticing a lot. However, they do have the ability to notice everything in a way that the left variable doesn't have, but they just have a difficulty accessing it. Finally, we have the right environment, right variable. Here's somebody who's the couch potato in the chilled out, zoned out, tranced out space, and their mentality is zoned out, tranced out. Something happens and they have no response. They have no affect. You can't tell if they noticed it or not because they're not really responding to individual discrete things happening in the environment. They're in a flow state, a trance state, where they're taking in the entirety of the environment all at once. Okay, so you can see how, variable kind of plays out in the different, in these different ways. So let's finally look at variable of motivation, left versus right. So this is in some ways the crown jewel. It's like what we associate with the mind. The kind of the personality, sun and earth. 70% of the neutrinos that imprinted you at the time of your birth are from this. So it's 70% of who you are, or at least of who your conscious mind is, in some way. So left variable motivation. I have left variable motivation. Highly strategic. It's much of what I've been talking about, the difference in left and right, really plays out here. It really plays out in the personality sun earth, because this is where you really see it as the personality of the person. So I can't even imagine what Ra Uru Hu would have been like with right variable in this position. Right? I have a hard time even imagining it, because he's so strategic. Everything's about strategy and authority. Everything's about, what's the strategy going to be? It's planned. It's almost Machiavellian. Everything about it is his mind is deciding what's the best action to get the desired impact, and so on. And this is so different than the right variable in this position, which doesn't have, again, the ability to direct, they try, but to their own detriment, to direct their mind to a certain area. What they need to do is just go into a flow state. There's a brilliant human design practitioner, Simon Jurjavchik. And, sorry if I butchered the name there. And Simon is so brilliant, and he's quad right. And I've talked to him on the phone for an hour and a half. And we will get into these flows where he's telling me so much good information. Like, he actually furthers and deepens and widens and broadens my understanding of so many different human design concepts. But he does it when he's in a flow state. And it's not saying I can't ask him a question. I can. It's not like it's going to interrupt his flow, as long as the question, sparks the flow in some way. But he's even told me, he said, the moment I remember, here's this thing I wanted to tell Jonah. Here's this information that I have. I'm going to think about it really hard. I'm going to focus my mind. I'm going to concentrate on that information so I can tell Jonah. It doesn't work. It comes out stilted. It comes out broken and wrong. It comes out, he feels like it comes out sounding not very smart. And then when he's in a flow state, it's like genius. So that's the thing to realize is, for the quad right especially, but for anyone who has right motivation, or even right variables in other places, to kind of acknowledge this rightness. But particularly those who have 3 or more right variables in their chart, it's so important for you mostly right people to be in your flow state. And with the right people, you're going to be in a flow state with those people, and they're going to pull the right information from you. The right information they need to hear, and even sometimes information you didn't know that you had, that they will pull out of you, and you get to benefit from as a resource for them. All right, I hope this is informative and a good start to your journey into variable. Or if you're already exploring this, I hope you got a few nuggets. Although nuggets is a very left variable thing. To take 1 or 2 nuggets from something is such a left variable thing. Right variable is like holistic. You take in the whole thing or not at all. With that, I'll leave you to your day. Thanks for watching from sunny and snowy Santa Fe.